Perfect. Knowing that we have our speaker on, Courtney, I thought to hand it out over to you first to kick us off. Share your thoughts for how this event came about, and then we can hand it over to our CEO, David Carnes, for a few quick words.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining. I think one of the things that continues to be a huge focus for our team and myself, particularly during these times, is the mindset piece. And so growth mindset is one of our core values as a team. I think it's one of the things that's driving our success right now. In the midst of all the different things that we have going on, the one thing that we can control is our mind. And as we learned through Colin Henderson in November, that our thoughts are infinite. You know, our physicality might be limited in one way or another, and our time constraints, but our thoughts are infinite. And so this is just sort of an extension on that growth mindset piece that we are focused on as a unit and as a team. And we're super excited to have OpFocus join us in this initiative and help sponsor this amazing event. I think a lot of you will have received this book. We're really excited about this conversation, really grateful to OpFocus for taking the time to do this, and hopeful that this will help continue to foster great relationships between our team and OpFocus as well. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And hi, everyone. My name is David Carnes. I'm the founder and CEO of OpFocus. Somehow I've been in and out of Salesforce offices for the last 15 years. So I've been in probably quite a few of your offices, but I guess none of us have been in any of them recently. OpFocus over time has evolved into a SaaS RevOps consulting firm. And what I mean by that is we pretty much just work with software companies, which has really been a thrill. So many organizations are developing such interesting solutions, just doing it online through a subscription model. And it's such a great fit for CRM. It's such a great fit for CPQ, for marketing automation. We just see these tools over and over. We partner very closely with private equity and VC firms. So many of these organizations, as soon as the funding hits, the expectations for growth they're literally crushing. And a lot of times something that gets in the way of scaling the operations is actually these systems that we spend our day in and out of thinking about. So we do a lot of strategic advisory work to SaaS companies, and we also do the hands-on keyboard configuration and development work on the Salesforce platform. So is Ed on the call today? Did Ed make the call?
I think Ed had a prior engagement for a customer engagement.
Okay, all right.
Which is, I know, a bummer because he was so excited. I know.
Yeah, I probably sold with Ed for, starting 8 years ago, something like that. Anyway, so what's so exciting to have an event like this is that I also know Bob Glazer fairly well from quite a few years back. Before I introduce Bob, I would like to ask everyone, if you haven't done the 4 capacities quiz, to just take a moment. Maybe Kyle, could you pop that into the chat?
Yes.
So there's a link in the chat, or coming in the chat, for the 4 capacities quiz, and it'll just take a moment, and then we'll get started. If you haven't done it yet, please just take a moment to fill out the 4 capacities quiz.
There is no pass or fail. Everyone has a top and a bottom.
Bobby, how long do you usually allocate? Three minutes or so?
Yeah, it should just be no more than a couple minutes.
Okay.
Veli, I noticed you just dialed in. We're just popping the quiz URL in the chat, taking a few minutes to fill it out right now.
Hey, sorry, a little trouble getting in. Thank you.
No problem.
We're all just so used to clicking on join meeting with that. Again, any reading gets in the way.
Yeah, I actually admit that having to think
I did the same thing 3 times in a row, and then I was like, wait, this clearly isn't working. Maybe I should look at what it's saying.
Actually, that's the real quiz, Bob, is whether we could get the speaker in.
Was it Einstein who said like the definition of insanity
Yes.
is
I use that quote a lot. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's just another one of those things that we'll check up to 2020 and leave behind.
Not many more days left.
Yep. All right. Has anyone who just took it finished it? Maybe get a nod on the screen. Okay. All right. Thank you, Courtney. So I'm so excited to introduce Robert Glazer. So I've called him Bobby for quite a lot of years. I think I'll have to go with the middle route, Bob. I'll have to call you Bob.
All good. Anything but Rob and you're good.
Okay. So Bob is the founder and CEO of Acceleration Partners. He's the co-founder and chairman of an organization called Brand Cycle. He's a longtime leader within an organization, a global organization called EO, and that's where we first met over a decade ago. Bob is a past president of EO Boston. He's run what's called the EO Leadership Academy, which is a global experience that I participated in, which was amazing. Bob, in the last number of years, is probably best known for his Friday Forward newsletters. And these is something that he started sharing with his team internally and then sharing it more broadly, and now has well over 100,000 readers. And I don't know if you've hit 200,000, Bob, but that'll be pretty special. So Bob is a national best-selling author. His most recent book is called Friday Forward. He also has a book, Elevate. And he has a new book coming out January 21st called How to Thrive in the Virtual Workplace. Bob has a podcast called the Elevate Podcast, where he interviews some really cool folks. He's also a regular contributing author to Forbes and Entrepreneur Magazine. So the list could continue. I'd really just rather get out of the way, Bobby, and let you speak, but it's really an honor to have you with us. I'm so appreciative of you joining us.
Thanks very much, Dave. All right, let me, am I up on the screen correctly? All right, we're gonna try to, thanks for having me. It's actually, Dave and I think we joined a group both when our businesses were like 10 or 15 people and $1 million in revenue. And so it's been amazing for me to watch his growth too with OpFocus and everything that he has done. We're gonna try to keep this interactive. I'm gonna make sure you're paying attention because there'll be a couple times in the middle where we ask you for questions, and I'll definitely leave time for questions at the end to get in and discuss. So I had a pretty unique experience. So 2 years ago, my parents sold my childhood home, and my mom is a prodigious collector of all my stuff, was very good at it. But when she sold it and they were downsizing, she came over to my house with a box and said, here's all the stuff, you can take it or I'm throwing it out. So presented with those choices, I took it. In there, she had saved every report card that I had gotten from basically 5 years old through college. So I grabbed a glass of wine. I thought it'd be fun to read through some of these. And then pretty soon that sort of turned into a bottle of wine as the reality of what I was reading set in. So we had the first grade teacher. His chief difficulty is attending to the task at hand. I'd given him his own desk that did not work. I think he can realize his full potential. Third grade, more effort on his part. Fourth grade, I believe he's capable of producing higher quality work. These are all different teachers, by the way. I'd like to see him reach these heights in all of his work. Fifth grade, you are capable of doing well. The implication is I wasn't. And then the sixth grade teacher just gave up eventually and said, I felt badly. I really could not do much to motivate Bobby. So, this was a pretty accurate portrayal of my childhood. I think some people might recognize that the distracted child early on is someone who's just more creative and entrepreneurial and doesn't fit into those boxes. But it took me a long time to figure out that path. I took a pretty winding road early in my career. I loved working with early stage companies. I loved the growth, but I had a few dead ends, some bad experiences, extremely poor leadership. And I found myself sort of 27 years old, really stuck in a job that I didn't enjoy, but I had committed to it because I really wanted to be there. This was coming out of the 99 burst-in bubble, and I wanted to kind of stick through something. And one day I was sitting, a huge turning point for me was I was sitting with a friend named Al Chase. We were having lunch. I was telling him about all my frustrations. And he looked me in the eye and he's like, my friend, I give you permission to leave. And I was like, wait, why do you need to give me permission? And he sort of was like, look, you're torturing yourself. You're doing this for the wrong reasons. And he was right. It was a huge push for me. I realized I had really been stagnating and not growing for a while. And I needed to sort of challenge myself and engage my core personality and figure out what I wanted to do. So I left. I started a company called Acceleration Partners. I actually started 2 companies at the time. And, we started to get some traction and do some stuff pretty well. And we got up to 5 or 6 people. And I was the head of marketing and the head of sales and the head of finance and the head of delivery and all those roles, and kind of got into this fork in the road. We had just actually done $1 million in revenue. We had some people. I was maxed out in all those roles. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to build a business. I'm entrepreneurial at heart. I hate politics, rules, HR, all that big company stuff. In fact, that's why we all get fired and start our own businesses in the first place, because other people won't hire us. But the truth was, it was sort of an inflection point, and I was also a little bit scared. I think this was uncharted territory for me. I didn't know if I was a good enough leader for what the business needed. I was definitely scared to let go and hesitant to let go more and rely on other people. And I really had to make a decision. And in the end, I pushed forward, pushed through that, and 9 years later, we had grown our company from 70 to 180 people, revenue almost 1,000%. Really more proud of, though, being kind of nominated by about 25 different awards around being a best places to work. And as part of that, we actually just raised some investment funding, but we were always self-funded, profitable. And 80% of our leaders had elevated internally into their role and were at the highest role that they had been. And, we did this through a process. I didn't have the word at the time, but what I came to understand was this process called capacity building. We had this idea that if we invested our employees holistically, not try to make them better AP employees, but actually just make them better, that we would get the work benefit from that, and they would get the benefit outside of work. So capacity building is really about improving incrementally across 4 areas: spiritual, intellectual, physical, and emotional capacity. And I'll go into this, and I'll go into each one, but it's similar to building a muscle. Like, it doesn't happen overnight. And I think we understand physical capacity, right? If I give you a dumbbell, it's 25 pounds and you can't lift it 3 times. If you do those reps every day, for 2 months, you'll be able to do them faster and easier by the end. And I think people make the mistake of thinking they're either naturally gifted or not at these capacities. It's not true. Each one of these can be grown. And this has been the sort of map for our organization and the map for me personally. And frankly, everything I've seen from high achievers across all walks of life. So there's a long definition here, but I think what capacity building really is the process of how you get better. And it all starts with spiritual capacity. So spiritual capacity is not religious. I consider this like, what is it that you want most and what are your values? It's kind of your North Star. I think it's really impossible for anyone to be a great leader if you're not clear on who you are and what you want. And a good friend of mine, Gary Ridge, is the CEO of WD-40. He has won all these awards. It's an incredible place to work globally. And he always likes to say that anyone making a decision at his company under one or more of the core values is always safe. And so I think that's really interesting, because if a person is safe making on the decisions of a company's core values, if you don't know your core values, how do you know the decisions that you're making are sort of safe for you personally and in your leadership style? So Dave and I went to this leadership academy, same one. I realized that I was a values-driven person, but I could not articulate my values. And I was just determined to do this. I spent 6 to 12 months. I worked on kind of a process for it because everyone told us that was important, but not how to do it. And I was able, after a while, to come away with 5 clear core values. And I can tell you that this is how I make decisions with my time. These are the things that I've doubled down on. The things outside of this are the things I moved away from. Our company's policies are tied very much to these values. And I think these are so important that we actually train all of our new managers on identifying their personal core values, because I think it's integral in terms of how they lead and how they live their life, and it is who they are. So Simon Sinek and some other people, have made a list of, actually, well, why don't we do the poll here? So I'm curious, for everyone here, we'll pop it up. Do you have a written list of core values?
So everyone, if you could go on your phones or in another browser, just go to menti.com and just punch in the code there, 1734893. We'll use this actually for the entire presentation, so you can keep it open on your phone or another browser. And you should be able to vote on that screen.
There's a typical percentage. We'll see if this group falls in line with it, or you guys are outliers. And Jaren, it should start. We should start seeing the results.
Yep.
As they come in. Yeah.
Kyle, you can probably start showing the results. I see.
I see the numbers.
19, 20 people have started popping in the.
All right, you guys are good. It's usually, I would say it's usually 80-20 or less. So this is an enlightened crowd. All right, why don't we wait for a few more? All right, so you guys are all in 60-40. That is well above average. All right, we'll come back to the next one, and we'll let that one keep going. Do you need to pop me back to my screen, or yeah, there we go. Sorry, now I need to share it. Share back. So, Simon Sinek has popularized this concept of why or core purpose. I think for a lot of people trying to understand, the core purpose for their life, like that's a high thing. I will say for most people, I actually think if you can get your core values first, your core values are sort of the pillars for which then that purpose or why should sit logically as a topic sentence. So for me, my core purpose is to share ideas that help people and organizations grow. That's literally why I'm on this call today. And I've really seen that supported by all of my core values. And one of the things about values is I think they really help us in these short-term, versus long-term decision-making. And in fact, I actually think it's times like 2020 when having values is most important. During the crisis earlier this year, we even narrowed down our purpose as a company, and my purpose, which was to keep as many people employed as possible through our work. And I was able to get me out of bed every morning, in March and April during some pretty tough days. I think, again, you got to have a compass during those times. We also went to the company and we said, look, like this is going to be bumpy, but we have core guiding principles that are going to get us through this. So, and these are in a hierarchical order. We're going to adhere to our core values. We can't see a reason why we would not live one of our core values. We're going to survive the recession first and foremost, because we got to make sure that we're all here to fight another day. We're going to be transparent and treat people with respect. It doesn't mean we won't have difficult decisions. And when we have those decisions, we're going to do the most good for the most people. We're going to move quickly and decisively, and we're going to keep the short term in focus. And we were also pretty honest about, hey, look, again, we got to keep the company functioning. Then we got to worry about our team, then our clients, and then our partners and our vendors, and in that order. So it really, I think back to sort of, putting this in sort of really stark terms, the people in Italy, I remember, with not enough ventilators as COVID going around, like they needed to have some rubric or something to say, how do I decide what is my value set about who gets this? And that's why I think, when you're pressure tested, those values actually become more important and not less important. So once you know what you want, intellectual capacity is the process of how you go get it. So intellectual capacity is about how we improve our ability to learn, think, plan, and execute with discipline. I think that's why you're here today. That's why you're on this call. I think about this as improving your personal operating system. Not can I do more, but how do I do something smarter, better, and faster than I did it yesterday? And there's a famous story of Warren Buffett and his pilot, where it relates to goal setting. I used to think I was really good at goal setting. I'd set a lot of one-year goals. I would hit them. Then I would realize they weren't really connected at all. And then I heard this story. So his pilot, Mike, wanted help from Buffett with goal setting. Warren asked him to list 25 goals he wanted to accomplish in his life. So he did it, and he came back. He showed it to him. And then Buffett said, all right, Mike, what are the 5 things you want to accomplish most off this list of 25? And he went back and he said, okay, I get it. He's like, here are the 5 that I'm going to spend most of my time on. And then I'm going to kind of deprioritize the other 20. And Buffett looked at him. He said, Mike, you don't get it. He's like, that other 20 is your do not do list. Do not look, touch, start those things until you start the 5 most important things, or you will not get those done and you will distract yourselves. So think about this in a business concept, right? When we set 10 quarterly goals, we end up getting like 2 or 3 done. And they're probably not the right one. I think organizations and teams that say they're going to do 2 or 3 things have everyone's focus on those. So you want to, rather than having a bunch of goals, you want to figure out the right ones and then align everything around it. And this helped me understand my new sort of thing on goal setting, which is picking long-term goals that fulfilled my values. Because why achieve a goal if it doesn't make you happy in some way, shape, form, or sort of your purpose? So the long-term goals achieve the values. And then actually the annual goals are kind of down payments on that. And then the quarterly goals are down payments on that. So I'm working towards the same most important things that should bring me fulfillment. This is exactly how an organization plans. This is exactly how an organization goes from a big vision to how do we get there to what's everyone working on to make sure that you get to where you go. And again, just make sure that when you get there, it's somewhere that you want to be. Another big thing of all high achievers that I have seen is, with the exception of about 10% of the people who are kind of night owls naturally, is having a morning routine. Highly productive people seem to have a morning routine that puts them on offense, where they get up, they exercise, they read, they write, they don't check their email, they don't do other stuff, and they focus on what they need to do for the day. Great trick I learned from another guy in EO is this notion: get an app around it, commit to 3 every morning. What are the 3 things that if I get done by 12 o'clock today, this was a good and productive day, and it moved me to where I wanted to go? And that way, if things go off the rails in the afternoon, and when you do that 3 times 30, 3 times 90 times in a quarter, you really start moving to those big things that you wanted to do. One of the things that you should not do is, consume tons of media late at night or early in the morning. If that morning routine of kind of turning everything off and thinking, reading, and writing is the perfect way to start a day, turning on social media, all the sensational stuff in the morning is possibly the worst way that you could start your day. And anytime during the pandemic, I have talked to a family member or someone else who's like having a bad day or is really pissed or frustrated, I'm like, have you watched the news a lot today? And I would say like 9 out of 10 times they would be like, yeah, I was watching it for several hours. So we know it doesn't make us feel good, but we do it. So we'll pop Mentimeter back on. I'd love to hear from each of you on if you believe that you have a positive morning routine in today.
And I noticed a couple people joined a little late. There's a link at the top of the screen there, menti.com. You just punch in the code to participate in the poll.
I like the dots flying across. It's pretty good. This is a high functioning crowd. So as these are filling in, one thing I will say is I think key part of capacity building is just doing the little pieces each day. So someone might say, well, I can't, morning routine or the whole thing, like it kind of overwhelms me. There's a great book called The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod if you want ideas. But it's really, if you can carve out 10 minutes, if you could change not starting with social media tomorrow, this does not need to be a whole, extreme makeover, in a couple of days. But I think if you start doing little pieces of this, you will know the value. But most of you, the majority of people have a positive morning routine. Like that is a great way to start. And 3 core pieces that I think a lot of people have. Hal's thing is 6, but that's a lot. but reading something that's positive or motivational or inspirational, just taking some time to think and clear your head, and doing some writing, whether that's in a journal or otherwise, or everyone wants to write a book and they never do, and the way that a book gets written is really by writing a page every week, for 52 weeks, rather than talking about wanting to write a book for 52 weeks. All right, so I think we got some good data there, and we'll flip back. So one of the key things around making intellectual capacity work is accountability and making yourself accountable. So you are far more likely to accomplish your goals if you share them with another person, or even in some sort of forum where there's accountability. So there's 3 levels of accountability that I've seen. If you can do one of these, you're in good shape. If you do all 3, you'll be a rock star. So the first is self-accountability, right? So this, for a lot of people, sorry, there's a little lag here. For a lot of people, this is a journal. If you've never journaled, or you haven't used something like the 5-minute journal, and you just start writing every day, like, hey, I really hope I go for a run today. You'll get tired of reading that, 5 days after not running. So just the act of writing creates self-accountability. The other is peer accountability. Take something you want to accomplish, your number of outreaches that you want to do that week, your exercise. You can almost build a little Excel dashboard, pick someone else on your team and say, I'm going to mail this to you on Friday. You don't even have to reply, but the act of having to do that creates accountability. And David talked about these groups that we were in. They were all based on just this peer accountability, and having to come back to that group the next month and say, you said you were going to do something, and you did it. And then the third level, and the highest level, is public accountability. So there's a sales coach named Jack Daly, kind of crazy guy out there. One of the things he does is he puts his goals, like his weight goals and all his personal goals and everything, on his website publicly, like every year for everyone to see. They're out there in the universe. I have an awesome story about this in our company. Someone on our team got into this notion of goal setting, kind of putting it out into the world. Stuff happened. She put, on her office publicly on a piece of paper that she wanted to get back into photography and do photography that year. Well, her husband had walked into her office a couple of weeks before her birthday and was like, well, this is perfect. You just told me what you need. And so, he got her a camera and photography lesson. So that, that's what happens when you put it out there, and you might make gift giving really easy for the people in your family. So another huge thing about intellectual capacity, I think, is demonstrating excellence in all things that we do. And this is one of my favorite stories, and it was actually sent to me by a Friday Forward reader. And it's a story about this guy named Daniel. So Daniel had bought a service plan for his old furnace in his New England house from a national company, who then outsourced the work to a local company. During the checkup, the technician determined that there was a leak on the gas valve and suggested it be replaced. And he also told Daniel to turn it off until he got back, because it's a gas furnace. So this is like mid-November, and it was starting to get a little cold. So after 5 days of no heat and a lot of back and forth, the local company came back to replace the part, which I think was a couple $100 item. Technician comes to his house with a new part. Unfortunately, he bought the wrong part for the wrong kind of valve, totally incompatible for a system. So he leaves without fixing anything. But before he leaves, he asked to use the bathroom. And what he did leave was leaving without flushing the toilet. So Daniel's a little exacerbated. He calls the company again, and they 2 more days, there's sort of no heat. And then eventually they said to him, even though it's the wrong part, they said, you know what, the furnace is obsolete and unrepairable. So not only can we fix it, but we're voiding your warranty that you bought. And now we're 4 or 5 days later into this, it's getting a lot colder. It's a Friday. Daniel's completely fed up. He doesn't know what to do. He calls his local plumber, Jason, and says, look, this is what's going on, and this isn't your kind of area. And Jason said, look, I might have the right part for that. I'll come over the next day, which is a Saturday, even though he was really busy and booked solid. So Jason shows up the next morning, probably what is his day off, and he goes downstairs and, goes to his house, puts booties on, covers his feet, walks in the house, go downstairs. Half an hour later, fixes the part with a $100 thing. The furnace is back on. And while Jason was working, he happened to go outside to where Jason's truck was parked. And not only was this truck immaculate, but there was a quote from Aristotle on the inside of the truck, as you can see on the right, famous quote, what we repeatedly do, what we repeatedly do, excellence then is not an act, but a habit. Well, I can't say that today. So, it is very clear how we show up every day, it has a huge impact on our level of success in the world. And, there was, 10 days of a company not wanting to fix this problem and 10 minutes of someone who just took great pride in fixing this problem. And we can see the difference. So physical capacity, this is the one I explained before. We understand, this is sort of our ability to improve our health, well-being, and our physical performance. And I'd always ask people, if you think people are different in work and outside of work, how many people on your team who've let their physical health completely suffer do you think are doing their best work and showing up full of energy, right? They're probably not. We are the same person inside and outside of work. And look, this has been tough during COVID, right? I mean, drinking's up. I heard deodorant sales are down 20%, but ice cream sales are up 30%. At the time when we need this the most, it's been hardest to do this. So, one of the things that we've tried to do as a family is really to focus on this. When they shut down the skiing, we were able to socially distance and hike up the mountain. I thought my heart was going to come out of my chest, and have our last run down. We've been doing family workouts. We've been climbing mountains, really trying to make sure that even with all the obstacles, we focus on, the physical part of our well-being, that we can do that. Another reason to do that is that, stress has reached just epidemic levels these days, and it's really making us sick. And most people don't realize the biological reason behind that. And that is we are designed with this fight or flight mechanism that's thousands of years old, so that if there is physical danger, our cortisol gets released, our hearts start racing, so that we can either fight or flight. The problem is we're using that mechanism for emotional and psychological stress, and it has the same physiological response on our body as physical stress. And then we actually need to fight or flight. And so this is why, during stressful times, the system goes into overdrive, and we need to focus on rest and relaxation. For some people, that's meditation. For others, it's going for a run or burning off that cortisol or getting it out of your system, because it really is making us sick, because it's like an old system that wasn't designed to work in a world where our stresses are more mental than physical. And we have to be aware of that. And look, a lot of us have been working crazy hero hours during the last few months. I think your health and resilience are more important than ever. I had an early point in this where I just was going and I just was getting less and less done, hit a wall, slept for 12 hours, and just was much better. I think we need to remind ourselves and each other to rest and relax, and not just work overdrive, because it doesn't produce a better outcome. And if you remember back to when we flew and we're on airplanes, right, you can't really be at your best if you're not helping others. And you think about, the analogy you always hear, and I think for a lot of us who are parents, it's hard to be like, what do you mean put on your mask, before helping others? But it's really clear, right? If you're incapacitated, you're just not going to do a lot of good for somewhere else. And I think a lot of us are just trying to help too many people, and the person that we really need to help right now is ourselves. And we got to step back, relax, take care of ourselves, focus on our health, detach from technology, and make sure that, we are fully there to help others if that's what we want to do. And then the last one is, and the hardest for a lot of people, is emotional capacity. So emotional capacity relates to how we react to challenging situations, things outside our control, and the quality of our relationships. So we started a leadership academy sort of program at our company that mimicked the program that Dave and I were in. It was led by this gentleman named Warren Rustan. And really interestingly, when we did a recap 3 to 6 months later after Warren came and spoke to the group, this was the number one thing that everyone remembered him saying. Really simple. He said, if you don't control it, why worry about it? Because you don't control it. And then conversely, he said, if you do control it, why worry about it? Because you do control it. And I think a lot of cases we tend to loop things in. Look, none of us could control that COVID-19 happened, but we certainly control how we react, what our company does, how we interact with other people. I think we tend to throw more in the control bucket than we don't understand. And I'll give you an example of this. Let's say that David and I get into a car crash at 7 a.m. this morning on the way to work. And David's super enlightened. He goes, wow, of all the things that have gone bad this year, I've got insurance. all good. Like I could have been worse. And he goes into work and says hello to everyone and he's nice and he has great meetings and he hires someone, all good, right? I go into work and I'm like, Jesus Christ, Dave, the guy rear-ended me and I'm pissed all day and I'm fighting with everyone and my wife calls me.
Because you have a nicer car, Bob.
Exactly. And I fight with her and all that stuff. We experienced the same thing. You know, how we chose to deal with that was largely a function of our emotional capacity. So don't throw stuff into the bucket of the stuff that you don't control. You know, pay attention to about what you control. So we'll run the poll again. I'm curious to hear from everyone. Do you think you spend a lot of time worrying about things that you don't control?
So actually, Bobby, I don't think you probably didn't know this, but I bought an off-road truck a couple years ago and I just love the damn thing. So I don't even want to think about getting into an accident.
What kind of truck is it?
It's a Tacoma TRD Pro. It's just fantastic off-road, really, really fun.
This one keeps bouncing around. But the majority, I think, clearly is going to be worrying about things that you don't control. And again, the tactic here, I think, is to understand the peace in a situation like that car crash or like in a difficult conversation. What happened? And usually it's what happened in the moment that you didn't control, but what happens after that you don't control. And now the no's they're coming in fast and furious. So it's about half and half. So at least half the room could spend less time worrying about things that they don't control. That's a good learning. And that's a really easy thing that you can kind of run as a litmus test for yourself, you know, starting today or starting tomorrow, the next time you run into one of these situations. So another huge part of emotional capacity is the importance of the relationships, and the ones that bring energy into your life, and then the ones that really make you more exhausted. And there's a term for that called energy vampires. So these are the people in your life, when you spend time with them, you feel worse. And all I can say is, if there are people you spend time with in your life and you feel worse, those are people you need to spend, less time with. And a tactic that was given to me by a guy named Don DePonde, who's talked about this widely, and Dave may have seen him spoken. And this was kind of life-changing for me a couple of years ago, was that moving your energy away from these relationships is not about blowing up the bridge or having a lot of breakups, which I think people avoid it. It's just about giving those relationships less energy, right? If you're calling someone every 4 days and you're arguing with them, then call them 6 days later or 7 days later, maybe, a relative. If you're making plans with someone, every couple of weeks that you don't really have plans with, push those plans out to a month, or don't say, hey, let's get together again soon, when you really don't mean it at all. So you don't have to break up, but if you can reallocate your time from relationships that drain you to relationships that energize you, it's a huge difference in you. And look, one of the things I'll say that is, if you came, this was true before this year, but anyone who is an emotional vampire, to you before this year started, is probably, absolutely suffocating and drowning you, right now, because I think that gets magnified when you get into difficult times, and just shows the importance of really needing to move away from those relationships. Emotional capacity is also about vulnerability, right? And I think we know, both personally and with friends, people want to be more vulnerable on a personal level and in an organizational level. I think a lot of times they just, don't know how to. And we're a virtual company. We get together once a year, and we really think that it's important to have those deep connections at that. So last year we took a risk. We brought a world-class facilitator who facilitates these things called One Last Talks. These are what is the talk you need to give if you're leaving the world tomorrow, and if it was your last talk on Earth. And let me tell you, a lot of people start off with Philip with here are the 3 tips to a happy life, and he does not let you get away with that as your last talk. These are deeply personal things. And so we said to the company, hey, we're going to open this up to 4 people. 8 people basically volunteered. We whittled it down to 4. They practiced for a month, and in front of 170 people, they got up there and told stories that they had never told before in public. Stories about their childhood, deep kind of things that impacted who they were, how they showed up in work, a lot about what you would want to know about this person. There was not a dry eye in the room when these 4 stories were done. And over the next 24 hours, employees shared at a level with each other that I have never seen in my life before. In fact, we joked that we after 24 hours, couldn't get the genie back in the bottle a little bit in terms of getting people to bring it back up a level. But it just showed to me how much people wanted to connect. People who had worked together for 5 years and had never had a personal discussion about their families or other, and realized that, both their fathers left them at the same age, and the types of connections and stuff that they had that they were just missing, kind of running by each other in an office every day. So it's very clear to me that, people want to be vulnerable. And actually during COVID at one point, I had shared with the team that I had really just hit a wall, and I was emotionally exhausted, and I had went and sort of crashed for 24 hours and come back. And even my being willing to share that with someone on my team, she came back and told a story that she shared how she was struggling with her team member, and the person on her team was struggling because she thought that her boss had it all together. And so it's this sort of amazing cascading effect of everyone assuming that everyone else had it all together instead of them, because they weren't willing to kind of say that. And it just brought, I think, the conversations to a new level. One of my just last favorite story on relationships, really cool story that I heard about a sales manager from Hilton named Justin Essner. So Justin, in March and April of this year, lost all of his 2 years of all of his 2020 bookings due to COVID-19. He was the top corporate salesperson in Orlando, which is the biggest conference market for Hilton. He has meeting planners calling him every day, canceling his meeting, wiping out his whole commissions for the year, and basically everything. And so Justin's looking at his whole world falling apart, and he says, and rather than saying, woe is me, and sort of looking at the upstream, he kind of looks downstream and is like, wow, if this is bad for me, then this is really bad for all these planners and everyone I work with. And what I've seen, in these tough times, the people who are handling it best are operating from an abundance mindset, not a scarcity one. It'd be very easy for Justin to have been well, screw them. I'm panicked. This is my thing. So what does Justin do? He gets his team together. He picks their top 20 meeting planners, and he sends them a kit with a baseball bat, a bottle of tequila in a plastic box, and caution tape. And he says, we're thinking about you, this will be over. And, just break this in case of an emergency, and inscribes their name on the bat. And within 48 hours of these being delivered, Justin's his texts blow up. People are posting this on LinkedIn. Look at this. And he gets $1.7 million of bookings for 2021 within the next couple of weeks, of people who said, look, I'm toast for this year, but man, I want to work with you when this is over. And just an awesome story, I think, of someone who, really focused on downstream about who's worse than me, rather than looking upstream and thinking kind of woe is me. So my own capacity building story, as David alluded to before, and started with just after I went to this leadership academy, I worked on my morning routine. I tried to think about how I could get better. I love the notion of reading something positive in the morning. I just didn't like the sort of rainbow and unicorny stuff that we were given to read, and the super positive quotes. So I had a bunch of stories and stuff I had been collecting, and I decided I don't know, I'd combine the writing and reading, and I'd send something to my team every Friday for a few weeks. I call it Friday Inspiration, sort of just push them around these concepts of capacity building or being better. It wasn't about our business. It was a cool story or something that I found inspirational, but in a sort of challenging way. And I didn't think anyone was reading these things at all. And then after 5 or 6 weeks, I did start to get feedback saying, hey, I shared this, or I went and signed up for this 5K after I read that story of what you wrote, or I shared this with my wife and she shared it with her company, or I shared it with my husband. And it was clear to me that it was going outside the company. And I was at an event with a few other entrepreneurs a couple of weeks later. We were talking about best practices. And I said, look, I'm sending this note to my team every Friday. I like it. It's a good exercise for me to think about something. The feedback I've gotten is really good. I suggest that you guys do it. And like good entrepreneurs, they said, all right, send us yours and we'll check it out. And I sent it to them. And 1 out of 5 wrote back and started it his own, has done it to this day. And the other 4 or 5 said, this is great. We'll just forward this to our company every week. And so when I realized that it was like being used outside the company and people were asking me to add them and I was managing this from BCC, and they were asking me, where are the old ones? And I was like, they're in my sent box. Like, I don't know how to get it to you. I set up like a $50 WordPress website with the old ones. I decided to recall it Friday Forward because they were being forwarded. And Dave might've been on this at the time. And I set up a newsletter template that just looked like a text email, but it let people sign up and I didn't have to manage the list. And I threw a couple hundred friends and family on it. I expected to get all these like nasty gram, unsubscribed notes, but I got the same nice notes back. They were just like, look, this has no agenda. They were forwarding it to their companies. Someone on Inc. wrote an article saying this is the only newsletter I ever read. And, 5 years later, I'd wake up and there were 100,000 people, which is now 200, including the LinkedIn, opening this thing across 60 different countries every Friday morning. And it just totally blew my mind. It never was intended. And I always get feedback every week, but during the last 6 months, I've gotten like deeper and longer feedback than I can remember. And just people kind of who are lonely and disconnected and just thanking me for kind of reaching out and sending them to something. And, what it showed to me, and I think Justin's example showed too, is that, even though we're not actually able to be with people, you can connect, you can reach out. It's not as ideal, but people they're really able to make connections during this time, and how important that is to emotional capacity and building our capacity going on. And again, for me, it just put a lot of pressure on me each week to write something that a couple 100,000 people would find value in reading. So one of the things was, as Friday Forward was sort of picking up steam and gaining scale, it never mentioned our company. I differed on a different website, and our marketing people and our company were like, why aren't you doing this on the company website? And people were asking me to feature stuff. And I was like, no, this is not what this is about. And I just had a very strong feeling of what I want to do and why I want to do it, but it didn't make any sense. I'm like, it's not related to my business. It's not related otherwise. Like, why am I spending so much time on this and why is it important to me? And as I was sort of going through those cycles, I was flying on an airplane back from an event, and I was watching this guy give a presentation, and he flipped this slide up on a screen. And it really sort of hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, I can remember seeing it. I got a lump in my throat. Like, I got a little choked up when I saw it. And if you remember back to those, flattering report cards that I showed you at the beginning, I was a very entrepreneurial kid who was bored in school. A lot of my strengths and the things that I do today that make me successful were actually misunderstood by teachers and other authority figures as weaknesses and discouraged. And for that reason, I really was an underachiever for a lot of my life, because the things that I liked to do and I was good at, people told me I shouldn't be doing. And so what I really needed, at that point and earlier in my career was for someone to help me understand capacity building, how I could get better, but do it for myself and not for other people. So, I think the biggest opportunity we all have is thinking about lifting as we rise, using our talents to help others get through what is going to be a few tough months. Like, I think there is some real darkness here before the light at the end of the tunnel, which is starting to come out, both physically and metaphorically the next couple of months. Dedicate excellence in everything that you do for yourself and for others, because it makes a difference. And, finally, I think that people are going to remember, I think, individual leadership careers and companies are going to be made during this time, because people are going to remember, how others treated them during this time when this time passes. And I think it's going to have a long-standing impact after that. So we'll end with one last poll, because I'd like to hear from each of you about what is one small thing you think you can do to build your capacity for the rest of this month. I guess these require typing, so they'll take a little longer to come in. remember, it could be a small down payment. It doesn't have to be a big, hairy, audacious goal.
I love that none of these say sell more stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I think they are means to an end. I think anyone who does any of these things will sell more things, but that's the output. That's not the input. Yeah,
but what I love most
yeah
about this, and Robert, I don't know if you prefer to be called Bob or Robert. I feel very uncomfortable calling you Bobby.
You can go either of those. Anything but Rob, I always say.
Okay.
They're all from the same
It's
branch.
hard for me not to call him Bobby.
Well, that's fair.
Half of my life calls me that, so it's all good.
Okay, so I'll fit in. But the way you opened up this presentation was so accurate, and that's about like empowering the individual to be a better person in their own right. Like, forget about the work components and the enablement and like the job piece. And that's why I love that none of these are about selling more product, because you can't sell more if this part of you isn't in like full swing. So I think this is excellent.
Yeah, and by the way, there's a bunch of stuff on values here, right? I would argue that all of you will feel much more comfortable selling in alignment with your values, and you try to do it today, but because you know it, but you can't articulate exactly where that boundary is. But everyone will do better doing that. And Courtney, to something you said there too, you know, but this is about being the best you, but being the best you that you want to be. I think there's a lot of pressure of other people about what success looks like or what that looks like. That comes from outward, not inward. And that's really the big difference, because there's a lot of people who have those goals and the houses and the this, and they will get that and they will not be happy, because you know what happiness really looks like for them? Sitting in a quiet cabin in Montana. That's actually really what they crave. But other people have been projecting things onto them that they've sort of absorbed as important.
Yeah, I mean, there's such irony in some of like the most successful, wealthy individuals in the world being so miserable. You know,
right, and alone too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I didn't use it in this, but oftentimes I use this picture of a cabin, because everyone has this goal of a house, right? They want this Cape house or beach house or ski house. And they might say that they want it for family, but I know a lot of people who in the chasing of that house end up divorced and with their kids not talking to them. So that's not really an aligned, you know, authentic outcome that they are looking for, nor do I believe that that would make them happy. All right,
absolutely. And as you say that, we're renovating our home, so I apologize for any background noise. I try and mute as much as possible.
This is a really good list. Someone should screenshot this, you know, write down what you said, look at the other ones. Everyone can do something on this list tomorrow, or do some piece of it for 5 or 10 minutes. So there really shouldn't be a lot of excuses. So with that, actually, just want to open it up to questions, and you can put it in chat, or if you want to, if it's a longer question, you want to say I have a question, you could put that in chat, and we'll find a way to we'll then call on you.
I have a super simple question.
Yeah.
Can you share the deck with us just so that we can kind of review on our own? I know that the 4 quadrants image was something that I really liked, and like it's a good reminder, like which boxes have I not checked today? You know, like kind of just looking back at it, you know, like I know for me, I'm going to focus a lot more on making sure that my morning routine is solid, and then also kind of wrapping up the day, like putting technology away, kind of making sure I have time to kind of just calm down and wind down before bed so I get better sleep. But making sure that I'm checking all the boxes is big for me. So getting that content would really help.
Yeah, they tie together, and I can show you actually, if you can just flip screens for 1 second. I think you're all getting a copy of the Friday Forward book. Friday Forward is the stories. David held up Elevate, just so you know. So Friday Forward is the stories. Elevate is actually the whole framework of capacity building, goes into a lot of this deeper sense. A lot of the stuff and the things you can do in the chapters are on the website, you know, for free, and you get that. So I'll work with Jaron and get it to you. And just as an example on that, as I mentioned, these things are really interconnected. And here's how I'll explain. Like if your physical capacity is diminished, right? If you're just tired and cranky, that hurts your emotional capacity. It hurts your, you lose sight of the big picture. You definitely lose your discipline. So, the goal in these things is that you'll always be out of whack, but to see the one that may really be pulling you, kind of pulling all the other ones off course. Other questions? There's usually 2 and then there's 10. So who wants to be the brave one?
Bob, there's a question from Menti.
Yeah.
And this person is asking, would love to hear your thoughts on the law of attraction. How does that fit into your life or daily practice?
Yeah, that's a good question. I will answer this in a way that makes both groups happy. The people who think it's garbage and the people that like it. I didn't talk about it in here, but there's a Friday forward, and I talk about in the book around, my family and I do vision boards. We've actually done that as a goal setting thing. I do believe in the law of attraction from a 2-part standpoint. I do think that there is something I can't explain, that when you focus on things and put them out there, that it seems to bring things towards you a little more. But there's also just the heightened awareness of that example of, putting the thing of the camera up on your wall as a goal that year and someone coming in and seeing that as a gift. The other example is what I call black Jetta syndrome, right? You buy a black Jetta and you drive it home and suddenly you see black Jettas all over the road everywhere. And there are no more of those cars, right? You are just suddenly aware of those. So I think when we put these things out there, when we focus on them, when you come back to your morning routine and you see it again and you realize, oh, you know what? I haven't called this guy and I got to call this guy because it's about this thing that I really want to do. Like this constant refocus and a realignment. I think that's a big part of the law of attraction, but I can tell you there's some very eerily creepy things on these boards that we've created as a family every year that have happened within a year or two, and things that I couldn't explain. And so I'm not discounting it. I'm going with it. But for the folks who really don't believe in that aspect of it, I would tell you that I think at least 50% of it is keeping in front of you, keeping in front of others. Let's just say you put, the 5 sales targets that you really wanted to hit, on the top of your desk or in your office. And then someone walks in and says, oh, Jane Smith, I went to college with Jane Smith at that company. I mean, that is where some of just the focus and attention on this brings connections that you might not have gotten otherwise.
Bob, we've got a couple more questions coming in on Menti.
Sure.
And I'm also curious if we want to do a quick poll of what folks think are their strongest and also weakest capacities.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I don't know if you can do them in the same one, but that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Or maybe the one where they need the most, maybe one where they need to focus on the most.
Sure. Kyle, could you pull that up on your screen while I see some other folks typing questions right now?
We want to do strongest capacity or weakest?
You could vote. I think the ones that people, maybe the one that, you don't need to work on the one you're best at. So the one where you think you need to really lean into is probably more helpful for everyone to see.
And I think everyone on this call had a chance to take the quiz at the start of the call. So
yeah. And look, it could be this month, it could be this week. I think these things do alternate. Jaren, do you want to read me those questions? Because I can't see this.
Sure, yeah. 1 minute. I think Kyle. All right, hold on. I've got it here.
So this is a physically strong group, huh? No physical weaknesses.
And we've only got 9 folks so far who've answered, so that result might change.
The one thing I'll say just about this as this is populating is emotional, physical, and intellectual are like constantly changing. Spiritual is one where I think a lot of people have done the work or not done the work. Like it needs some revisiting over time. But if you actually do the work and get the clear compass and direction on where you're going, like that one will stay pretty aligned for you. But it actually it is the upstream to all the other downstreams. How do you want to know where you want? I think where you want to focus your intellectual capacity is very determined after you figure out what it is that is most important to you. And that actually tends to make you more physically and emotionally resilient. And in terms of the relationships that you want to double down on and remove, will be very aligned to what it is that you want. Once you lock in on your spiritual capacity, your relationships will change. Your patience for people who are not aligned to what you want or clearly outside your value set will diminish pretty rapidly, and you will be drawn to people who, you know, are connected to the things that are important to you.
Oh, there we go. So that was one of the questions that came in.
Yeah, so these are, you go, that's a really good, I'm very close to getting this course out on this, because I get a lot of, there's some examples about how to do it. So an example of a core value. So I always think it's more than a word. I talk about sort of the concept, and there's a process to do it. This core validator, it should be more than a word. It has to be a phrase that's differentiated. You need to know, you know, if you're doing a good job at it, you have to be able to objectively rate yourself. Like, did I do this or not do it? And it needs to be able to kind of be a decision-making matrix. So an example of mine is like long-term orientation. Like, that is really important to me. Long-term orientation. I struggle with people who are very short-term. When I'm looking at a decision, I could be like, am I making the right long-term decision here? Am I focused too much on the short term? And I can objectively sort of rate myself. I'm looking back saying, you know, did I do a good job on that in terms of having a long-term focus? Interestingly, you know that something is a core value when the opposite, if you imagine a person as the opposite of the core value talking to you at a cocktail party, it should be like kryptonite. It should, because they are actually violating their core value, right? So in that example, if mine is, I'll give you another example. Mine, find a better way, is like my dominant core value. If I'm sitting there talking to someone and they go, this is the phrase that literally makes me want, like, yeah, we've just always done it that way. It can't get better. It can't change. Like, it's like stabbing me, like telling me that something cannot get better because it's diametrically opposed. So it's one of the tests that we use to figure out whether something is a core value, by sort of imagining the inverse. And you should see someone look physically a little bit frustrated or uncomfortable, because that's what a core value is. When it's violated, it really doesn't feel good. And when you're doing stuff aligned to it, it feels like really like you're in flow. I borrow a lot from Hal Elrod's Miracle Morning. So writing, reading, meditation. This has been much harder during COVID and without travel and with the monotony of the routine. But I found those things really important. And then that most important thing is just not opening the work stuff until I'm ready to do it. That picking the 3 things every morning on my task list, like the 3 things that would make this a good day. And by the way, if I go over my tool and my long-term plans, there's a free tool on my website called the Whole Life Dashboard under Friday Forward, which lets you align this stuff. I kind of pick those 3 because I look at the quarterly goal and I'm trying to say, all right, I'm trying to get towards that quarterly goal, because that quarterly goal was tied to the annual goal. So I really just believe in alignment. I think if each day we can nudge ourselves like 5% back on the path, then we kind of get momentum in the way that we're going. Hardest capacity, I think, is spiritual. Figuring out your core values, doing that work is a lot of work, but it is the most rewarding. And I truly believe it's the gateway to everything else. Like, as I said, once I became clear that these were my values, there were a couple organizations that, you know, I did work for, or nonprofits that I dropped off of. I doubled down on other ones. I just became really clear to me where I was going to be doing things that I enjoyed and where I was going to be frustrated, and with, you know, which were the relationships that I got value out of, which were the ones that were frustrating. But there's no hack to that. I mean, and I'll share it when it's out, the course on the core values I just did, because people have asked me for it. You know, it's an hour course, but it could be 6 months of work. Like, there's just not a hack. You need to do the work. You need to come up with the values. You need to road test them. But, and what I'll tell everyone, you know, they're there. It's kind of like no one gave you the instruction manual to you. They're there. if I test you situations and I tested when you got uncomfortable, it would be like you'd be describing when your core value was violated. You just wouldn't be able to put a name on it. So everyone knows the feeling. And the analogy that I give, which I just think is so clear, is like if I were to drive a nice car through a tunnel with the lights off, I would hit the wall. It would, make that terrible noise. I would pull the car off the wall. I'd eventually hit the other wall. I'd get through the tunnel, but my car would be pretty beat up. Like articulating your core values is like turning on the lights, painting the lanes, and like staying away from out of bounds for you, because out of bounds is where you're violating your values. And any of you in sales who probably felt that you had to violate one or more of your values to make a sale felt terrible and like remorseful after that sale. Yeah, intellectual capacity. So some of the key tenets in it are morning routine, learning, setting goals, having a learning thing. We talked about creating accountability, creating routine, all these things that it's kind of like the automation sets you free. But I think, if you just did those four, for most people, which is getting clear on the short and long-term goals, kind of setting a productive morning routine, creating some accountability, and commitment to learning something new regularly that you want to expand your knowledge around, you'd see a pretty big change in intellectual capacity.
Yeah, and I believe we answered that one.
Yeah, the law of attraction. It attracted that question back again.
Are there any last burning questions for Bob? And if anyone would like to speak, feel free to unmute yourself as well. We can hear from you directly.
So Bob, your next book comes out January 21st?
I released the ebook this summer on virtual teams that was just done quickly out of a presentation because we were getting asked a lot. I then sat down and worked with a publisher and sort of did a full-length book with a bunch of interviews with CEOs and companies who are doing it. Unfortunately, it's launching in London first, and then it will be back to the US by the end of Q1. That one's called Thriving in a Virtual Environment.
I have one, I guess, closing question, unless there's other questions, but around that virtual environment, I would be curious to know from your perspective, what do you think is like the biggest takeaway or biggest impact you've seen COVID have on individuals, like the human experience, and then this like virtual world?
Yeah. I think the virtual work and sort of digital consumption have had the same thing, where I think we just took 10 years of what was going to be progressive growth and accelerated it. So we're probably not going back. There's a thing I don't think a lot of people realize, and depending on where your company was beforehand, this has been like the worst time ever to work remotely. Your kids are home for a lot of people. The things that the flexibility of remote work, of being able to go for a hike or have, go to spin class or have lunch with a friend, or all of those things have been taken away. So anyone who likes it now at all, I think would really like it, in a world where it's supported and more normal. But so I do think that increased flexibility and flexible remote work is here to stay. I think different strategies will be right for different companies. What I have said to a lot of people is I think the companies are going to have to figure out the strategy and then support it. They might want everyone back to the office, but people don't want to go back to the office. Or they might want to give up the office, but people are dying to go back to the office. And then there's hybrid, which, for some companies will be the absence of making a decision. I don't think there's a wrong decision among those three, but I actually think the companies need to make it, support it, and understand that maybe a quarter of their employees won't be on board with it. Maybe they want to go back to the office or they don't, or otherwise. But failure to sort of pick a strategy, I think, is going to make a little bit more of a mess than anything. But I think that more flexible work is here to stay. I think it's a huge asset for organizations in terms of where they can hire and where they can find talent, and opening up all kinds of opportunities.
I 100% agree. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Courtney, for the question. And Bob, for speaking with us and sharing all your insights. Sean, I just wanted to ask if you wanted to say a quick final few things to wrap us up here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jared. And for those of you who I don't know, Sean Lowe, I'm one of the sales managers here at OpFocus and currently under the weather. So apologies for the raspy voice. But just to wrap up before we break, Courtney, thank you so much for giving our team the opportunity to put this on. Obviously, Bob, thanks so much for the insight and the workshop. I hope everyone got as much out of it as I did. And I think a couple logistical things. Number one, if you haven't already registered to receive Bob's book, please do so. If you need a new link, I think, Jaron, you can go ahead and send that out. And then just really quickly in closing, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a quick OpFocus plug as a salesperson as we wrap. But as David had alluded to on the front end, really the vision for OpFocus and in the space we want to play in is we want to be that go-to partner in the ecosystem that you all come to help grow your SaaS accounts. If we kind of turn the clock back 4 years ago when OpFocus was just kind of a generalist in the ecosystem like a lot of partners are, to where we are today, where we kind of doubled down and said we really want to focus on SaaS only. Kind of the unique thing we've been able to do is, and part of our growth and our go-to-market strategy has been to really partner with private equity firms, right? If we think about the SaaS industry, most of these companies at some point are going to take money from whether it's VC on the front end or private equity when they're in high growth mode. And we've really been able to work with these private equity companies and work backwards and develop a framework within Salesforce and other typical go-to-market tech tools that we see to set these companies up for growth, to hit their target goals, to ultimately exit out of the investment, right? So long story short, bring us in early, bring us in often to these accounts. As David mentioned, we've really invested and developed strategic advisory in addition to our delivery folks on the back end. But I think what our team does really, really well is getting involved on the front end and really building out strategic roadmaps with companies. And obviously the result of that, it's a win-win for us, right? It's essentially creating a demand plan on a quarterly and annually basis for our customers. So I'll stop there. Thanks again to everyone. We look forward to speaking with many of you individually, and have a good rest of the day.
Yes, thank you all. And thank you all so much for putting this together, OpFocus. Bob, for doing an incredible presentation for us all. This has just been extremely enlightening. And as you mentioned, Sean, this is a great opportunity for us as a team to co-sell. The biggest focus that I have for our business is to look at our partners as a co-selling team, not just someone that comes in to do the implementation. Let's work together. Let's leverage OpFocus, who is obviously very eager to work with us all, which is wonderful. And let's get those books and read up on some of Bob's theories. I think this is wonderful, and we can take this into the remainder of our fiscal year.
Yeah, reach out if you have any questions. You can contact me on the site. I'm happy to help or try to answer anything that comes to you later.
Great. Thanks for the offer, Bob. Thanks, Courtney.
Right.
Thank you, everyone, for taking the time.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.